morning, everyone. Good morning to those who are joining us online as well. It's a beautiful day today. I'm Glenn Montgomery, Executive Director of Vision Action Network, convener of Washington County Thrives, welcoming you here for our quarterly gathering. We're mixing things up a little bit. You can see we've got TV cameras, so we're grateful for Tualatin Valley Community TV, who is recording this and will have it available for broadcast later on. So it's not a live broadcast, but it will be available to those who want it, and we'll have it on our YouTube channel as well. I'm just curious in the room, how many of you are new to coming to a Washington County Thrives gathering? Okay, we've got a few. Very good. Nice. This has been an ongoing collaborative since the recession of 2008. Back then, Community Action approached Van and said, hey, people are in crisis, and we are all about addressing the issues of poverty in Washington County, and now there are more people who are falling into the river, and we got to figure out how to pull them out. And Van, you are a convener. Can we work together to just bring our public and nonprofit sectors together to talk about how we can provide some support? And from those conversations, folks saw value in that continued collaborative engagement. So even after we got into a recovery phase from the recession, they still wanted to meet. And then they started to think more strategically about what their priorities were and what they shared in common. And so Thrives was dubbed Thrives, I think, in 2012. So this has been an ongoing gathering. Sometimes it's been a monthly gathering, sometimes a quarterly gathering, depending on what the focus was. We met more frequently or less frequently as the need arose. So we spent a lot of time working on the housing and homelessness issue for the better part of 4 years. Some people around the table here were involved in that. And then the housing bond was passed, the supportive services measure was passed, and we started to direct some attention to the behavioral health sector and the workforce, building the capacity of behavioral health workers. So that's kind of where we are today. But these quarterly gatherings now, we've decided, are focused on those priorities of Thrives, which are workforce development, housing and supportive services, and early learning and youth enrichment. And so today's focus is that early learning and youth enrichment. And we've got a whole bunch of speakers today who are going to be sharing about their organizations and the work that they're doing. So I'm excited to get to that. So without further ado, I think I'm going to go ahead and bring Paul up. And Paul, you'll be able to use one of our fancy mics. And, my director yeah, Brian, welcome.
Are these on? Okay.
Yes, they should be on.
It's been a while since I've used a mic.
Yeah.
Karaoke?
And while you're introducing yourselves,
you first.
Oh, that's great.
We had a staff member that did, so sorry.
I'm going to switch the slides, so I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
Sounds good. And we have like 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right. Well, thank you for having us today. My name is Paul Sell. I'm an associate director here at Youth Development Oregon. We're a state agency. Sometimes if you see our email, it comes out of ODE because we are, that they do our administrative work along that side. So a pleasure to be here today, and I'll turn it over to Brian to do a quick intro for himself.
Thanks, Paul. Is this, working? Good. Mm-hmm. Brian Detman, Youth Development Oregon Director, excited to be here. What's interesting, I'll just say quickly, I used to work at this kind of marketing PR consulting firm called Metropolitan Group. And Metropolitan Group was involved in what then was called Vision West, if I'm not mistaken. Glenn knows the history. And so I worked there for 10 years and was familiar with the kind of community work that was happening to create a kind of multi-year vision for Washington County, if I'm not mistaken. And here you all are, now renamed, rebranded as Vision Action Network, which makes sense, like some forward momentum. So it's just kind of fun and exciting to be back involved in this area. And Youth Development Oregon, we're going to walk you through some slides. I've been the director for about 3 years, and I have experience leading nonprofits and working at the county level in Multnomah County in the juvenile justice space, working in the Multnomah County Chair's office, and having worked in the also private sector in marketing and PR, as I mentioned. So just bring a real passion for young people and families, and we've got resources that we administer and grant, and we'll talk to you more about that. But just excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. I guess I should probably introduce myself a little bit more than just the title, right? All right. So I have been with Youth Development Oregon just over 3.5 years. I'm one of those people that decided to change careers mid-COVID, actually early COVID, and joined Youth Development Oregon from where I previously was in K-12 education, where I spent about 20 years as an administrator and an educator at the high school level primarily. And honestly, one of the reasons I came to Youth Development Oregon is around the passion to support youth. There's a gap, right? I think we all recognize there's a gap in serving youth. And K-12 education does a great job for a lot of the youth, but the reality is sometimes it just doesn't always meet that need. And so I think we're here to share a little bit about Youth Development Oregon. I was able to meet Glenn through some follow-up work and some public engagement that I do as part of my other role in YDO. But I'll turn it over to Brian just to share a little bit about who we are and get things going.
You might
I'm going to go over here. We'll split
Well, I
the
was
screen. That's
actually
normally how we do this, but yeah. Sorry.
Is it on?
It's not liking me. Oh.
Oh, I'm
No,
going to do
no.
this while it's sharing here. Come back to your show. Is it working?
There, no, the button's on. Let's see. Uh-oh. Did I do that? Oh, okay. Ha. All right. There we go.
All right, I'll just kind of run you through this, not reading it to you, but our work is statewide, ensuring that the young people are, by statute, our age range is between 6 and 24, right? A lot of the work that we support is supporting like teens. I can sometimes think of us as kind of teen advocates and young adult advocates, given that, as Paul mentioned, some of the gaps and barriers that exist are happening as young people are moving through our public education system and sometimes becoming disconnected, sometimes not feeling inspired, not feeling like they belong. But then as they get older, 16, 17, 18, the systems aren't as well developed to support those younger adults, right? They still technically could be in a public high school, but is that the best place? And so a lot of our work tries to reconnect young people who've become disengaged in some way. And we work, as I said, throughout the 36 counties, throughout the 9 federally recognized tribes. And our vision is that all youth have an opportunity to thrive and achieve their full potential. Jump to the next one. One of the things that you may hear, and for those of you who are familiar with us, you may have heard of the Youth Development Council, which is our governing board, our governing body. That was developed first after the Oregon Commission on Children and Families was dismantled. So if you were familiar with that system, that sort of preceded us, and we took on some of the responsibilities from the Oregon Commission on Children and Families, which was also very localized in some of its work. So we took on some of that, but that council preceded the creation of the division, which is the staff, Paul and I, and about a dozen or so others. Our budget is housed within the Oregon Department of Education, as Paul mentioned, but we are technically an independent agency with our own governing body, the Youth Development Council. If you have any interest in that council, happy to answer questions about that, or maybe contact me offline. We are always looking for people who are really passionate about youth development, and if they're interested in council service, right, on a state board. And now we've started to rebrand and adopt kind of a new name, our Youth Development Oregon. You're going to hear us referring to that, really to represent the combined work of the council and the division, and hopefully make it less confusing. But we still sometimes say YDD or YDC, so excuse us, we'll get it right as we go. And Paul, is this you or is this me?
This is you. I didn't
Okay.
realize the transition was on the slide.
Oh, it's
so
all good.
I'll run through it because there you go. You can watch the tree grow.
Yeah, there you go. Look
Yeah,
at that.
Yeah, that's pretty
Visuals, fancy. Now, yeah, I think it's a pear tree. Tried to be appropriate. Apples works, but, not oranges. That wouldn't work up here. Yeah, we've, as I said, administer both state and also federal resources. We have some federal dollars from the, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, which is part of the Federal Department of Justice. And then we have state general funds and also some legislatively driven funds from the Student Success Act. Those are the resources that we bring to the table. Obviously, you've got resources in your community and in the form of nonprofits and workforce. I see a workforce board person here. Hey, hello, Andrew. Right. So whether it's nonprofits, schools, school districts, community-based organization, churches. I mean, those are all the resources I think we all want to be mindful of and do what we can to support. We do what we can to support their work. We do have a formal application system for our grants. It's pretty competitive. I'll tell you, we're dealing with a really competitive round of awards just this past that has concluded through the summer. But we do have then, when we make those awards, we do have requirements for our grantees, right, around data and both qualitative and quantitative. And from that, we're driving towards youth impacts. And those impacts often, for us, are really driven by the communities and the organizations that we support, right? We have big ideas about reducing barriers and transforming systems, but also recognize that the solutions are often very much community-based, and you may have a different way or a different set of local resources to meet the needs in your community versus what's happening in Ontario versus what may be happening in Redmond versus what's happening in Medford. So we try to find that balance between some of our kind of big vision values and what actually makes sense on a local level. So
I'm going to cheat.
there you go.
Maybe. Where's the button? There it is. Oh, it still didn't go. Uh-oh. Oh, there it goes.
There.
All right. Sounds good.
Is this me again?
I don't know. We can rock, scissors, paper. Let's go for it.
We've done this before. Yeah. All right. So I think my part is coming to a close here. I think then I'll turn it over to Paul after this. Just some kind of said some of these things in terms of what work we do as an agency. The grant making work is often what we're known by, and lots of, again, community-based organizations have applied. Maybe some of you here in this room. Again, it was a competitive round. Maybe some folks who got awards and some folks who didn't. And we appreciate your interest, and we'll, in the next biennium, have a new round of dollars. Policy advocacy, certainly advocating, as I said, for young people and cross-system work. Our council does the advocacy, we do the education. We work in juvenile justice as well in terms of crime prevention programs and have some specific funds that are actually allocated to counties and tribes. It's not competitive funding, it's just directly allocated. Mentioned the re-engagement, reconnection work, which is funded through the Student Success Act. Paul and folks that he supervises and also manages are doing a ton of work to just provide technical assistance and support for community-based organizations, other applicants who maybe weren't funded, and what can we do better? What's the way that we can access the resources? And so our grant managers are doing a lot of technical assistance to help people access either our funding or other funding in other agencies. I think a big area that we'll continue to work on is just cross-agency work with Health Authority, with Oregon Youth Authority. Sometimes, if it's the siloing that happens in government is a complete pain. So we're trying as a small agency to figure out ways to bring agencies together. And we do have some specific federal responsibility around monitoring facilities that like jails and other facilities that house young people. So we do go in and make sure that there's that young people who may be brought into a jail are safe, and so we have some federal responsibilities in that regard around compliance.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So I think one of the things that is a really big piece for us is when we talk about that cross-agency collaboration, we work a lot with Oregon Department of Education, obviously. It's also in our emails. But we also work with HEC, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. And so when you look at those two systems, there's a lot of support that can happen for youth in between those systems. And so it's kind of that void within that work. And so kind of the next piece that we're going into, it seems weird to put our grant funding when it's actually kind of closed at this point. Competitively, we had about a 30% award rate. We had over 400 applications across our system, and we had a 30% award rate, meaning we ran out of money at that 30%. So it's both, I think, a really positive thing, seeing that we're getting dollars out, but recognizing that we're not hitting everybody along the way. But the reason I put these slides up here is that I think it also kind of ties into our technical assistance work. It's why we're here today, just sharing about the work, because one of the things that our re-engagement system, when it added in 2019, that's why I was originally hired for YDO, is to create that system, is the more that we can connect all of these pieces for youth, the better we're going to help support them. And those connected systems is really what's going to form those relationships and opportunities for youth that we lose in the system, right? So our grant and aid funding is kind of broken down into two categories, like Brian's talking about. Youth grants, that's where I primarily sit. That's my work around the competitive side of it. We call it the other side of the house, the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Department. Another associate director runs that. And you can see where those are focused. There's a lot of alignment there. So Anya, who is another associate director for us, we spent a lot of time working on, like, how do we connect these systems? Because really we recognize that the youth are in that juvenile justice system need the support for the other work to stay connected and find opportunities within the workforce. And I think you'll get these slides, right? Okay. I didn't want a slide read, so I can, but I don't know. But our our YDO grant funding is broken into some really large categories. This is our largest bucket of funds. It's the community investment grants, and you can see the wide array of opportunities around it. And what I think you'll see is the system as I go through this. That's why we use these slides. So in our community grants, over there on the left side, you can see Youth Promise Initiative and Youth Solutions Initiatives. Those are our broadest and kind of most flexible grants we offer. And it's also one of our biggest pools of dollars that we put out every year. Youth Promise was just over 10 million. I think, no, it's just under 10 million. I said it backwards, sorry. Just under 10 million this last biennium. It's focused really just on opportunities for youth, and those range from a whole different variety of things, from youth after-school programs to access to opportunities to sports programs, and just really kind of the innovative work to support youth along the way. So it's kind of that follow-up of prevention. Youth Solutions is just creative things. So it's funds that we specifically dedicate to an opportunity to be innovative, to create system change along the way. And then these two are a little bit more specific. So workforce readiness. So workforce board I heard was here, right? So it's some of that work specifically targeted for youth and those ages 14 to 24 around skill development and the soft skills that are really critical. And then youth violence and gang prevention, which is it's a relatively small grant fund for us, but it's very specifically focused on direct services for youth that might be involved in that. So a lot of those grants are actually on boots on the ground out there working with youth along the way. And feel free to stop me too as we go. I can talk for a while if you guys want me to. Oregon Youth Reengagement, that's one of our kind of follow through. It's our second largest pot of money. It's where our re-engagement system comes out of, but we also have re-engagement opportunity grants, which are direct service. And those grants are specifically focused on youth who have left high school without completion. So there's a population out there, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 a year, somewhere's up to 5,000 a year, that don't complete every year. Those funds are targeted to support the whole system along the way with that, from outreach to engagement, right? And then this is where those connections come in. So you can see where that layer is coming. The most recent funds we've added are Future Ready, which is our workforce dollars. So we're purposely putting these together because we recognize youth that don't complete high school or are struggling to complete high school, they're going to need those supports to move into that workforce as well, right? So those are kind of the broad scale of that work. I'll pause for a second. Brian, do you have anything you want to add?
No. I just wonder if there are questions. Like, is
Yeah.
anybody confused or?
You probably have to use a mic, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
happily. If
absolutely.
they're happy to hand it out.
I'm always happy to handle my.
Are there any grantees in the room? Are there folks who are aware that they're getting youth development? Okay, one person, I think I saw. It's a couple. Yeah.
All right.
Andrew? Three?
I need it for the TV. That's right. I forgot. Sorry. You said that you are working with ODE with the Student Success Plan. Is that right? So how do you work together, and how do you avoid duplicities? So how do you avoid to duplicate efforts that are not aligned?
Yeah. Paul and I can probably try to grab it. Well, so Student Success Act, right, is a big legislation. I think 2019 it was passed and funded, all sorts of supports and programs. We have a piece of that Student Success Act funding directed towards re-engagement. And so that is specifically focused on those young people that Paul just mentioned who have become disconnected from school, lacking credits, don't have kind of the right plan or pathway. So there are other Student Success Act dollars that are directed in other ways. I would say that we sit on various committees, and we've got folks integrated in our work who are part of other Student Success Act funded programs. So we're very much connected. I think that there is some intentional overlap, right? There are things that we can fund around outreach and wraparound supports, right? That another grant or another, a school-based program can't do. So they're kind of braided and connected. Is it always perfect, and is it always, a beautiful bouquet of braided funds? Not necessarily, but there is overlap, and I think that's good and intentional because youth and families bring different needs, and some funding streams also have very specific, you can do these kinds of things and you can't do these kinds of things. But we're pretty well integrated, have figured out ways to get our teams embedded in some of that work to find, not to duplicate where it doesn't make sense, but also to overlap where it does.
And the only piece two pieces that I would add to that as well is we sit on a lot of advisory committees for the different grant systems. And so you've heard me reference HEC, the Higher Education Commission, as well as ODE. So I sit on a Student Success Act committee, so we actually talk about the grants that are coming in through that committee and align that work. And then the other piece that I would add is that's really what a lot of times where our technical assistance comes into play with our grant managers. So advantage of sitting on committees is we know what's out there to some degree, right? But then we also can help provide our grantees with some guidance around, okay, how can we help with the braided funding? Not that it's our decision, but we can say, hey, this makes sense to pay on that. One of the things I actually didn't talk about with youth development dollars, so you think of ODE, it goes to K-12 education, right? Which makes sense, right? It should go to school districts, right? But what youth development Oregon dollars are incredibly flexible. So a lot of times when we're talking and working with grantees, they're like, I can pay 100% of our staffing costs out of these dollars. Absolutely. Or if you're paying for some initiatives with it. So these dollars are very flexible typically, and more flexible than what you're going to see in some of the more direct funding. So that's pretty helpful. Great question. Thank you. Other questions? Wow, quiet group. All right. So what I put on the screen is just some examples of our grants. I don't want to sit here and read through them. We do have a few grants. The Washington County falls into the regional solutions map of Metro. And the reason we use the regional solutions divisions of regions is awarding processes. So one of our goals that when I started is to diversify and expand our grant portfolio across the state, because we're recognizing a lot of grants and majority of the grants are going to go to high density populations and areas. We wanted to make sure that our grants were accessible across the board. So we implemented that. So Washington County is part of that metro, which receives about 50% of our grants, typically 40 to 50% of our grants coming into the area. We have a few examples of Washington County. I'm looking up here. I knew I should have put which ones, like highlighted or something, which ones are Washington County. But Tualatin Hills is a new grantee for us that's joining us, so that's pretty exciting to have them up here as a community investment around their lifeguarding. That's actually one of the things we're seeing more and more is around lifeguard training coming out in workforce. I see a lot of heads shaking, so obviously you guys have had those conversations, which is exciting on it. And it's just accessible opportunities. Yeah, Adelante. Yeah.
Yes.
And they've been a long-time grantee for us.
Yep.
And just some different examples. These are their
And these, Paul, are
Executive summers.
last biennium grant
no, these
examples,
are
these
new
current?
ones. These are the ones coming out. So we
Okay.
are in the process of finalizing all these grants for it, and just under $30 million in youth service grants across the state. This is future ready. So we have one. I don't know if anybody. This is a popular one in Washington County. Working Theory Farms. Anybody heard of Working Theory Farms here in Hillsborough? Pretty cool opportunity that they're doing. We actually have been funding them for a few years as well. And then you have a couple others located relatively close. I think this one, though, Marion Polk counties might be reaching up here because I think that's a joint YMCA grant as well. And then lastly, re-engagement. Again, very broad services around it, but you can see that you have some that are decently close to this area, connecting a lot of these. One of the things about the re-engagement grants and the Future Ready grants is we're actually going to start having what we call re-engagement collaboratives. So we bring all of these grantees together to expand services in these defined areas. So there'll be 2 of those collaboratives here in the metro area. There's a new grant coming out probably mid-November, I think. I'm trying to remember the dates that we've been talking about. And it's really a system level change. And so it's a small grant, it's a $100,000 opportunity for any of our awardees that can apply for it. They're going to do 2 things. One is about system level change in a dedicated service area that they're focused on. And then also they're going to bring together the collaborative in a designated region of about 15 grantees to talk about, well, hey, the more you talk, the more that you can connect services, right? And those relationships are critical. So, but that is actually, I think that's the end. I think our contact information is the last one. There you go. Yeah. So, I don't know, questions or thoughts? And Glenn, did I miss? You and I talked about it. I just want to make sure I covered.
You're doing a great job.
We thought about. All right, perfect.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Brian. Any other questions for our speakers?
You have our contact information when the slides get shared, so
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thanks for having us this morning.
yeah, thank you.
And now I'd like to welcome Katie and Larry up, if you want to both. Who wants the clicker?
I'll do it. You want to do it? I'll do it. That's
Okay.
fine. It's like an Oscar. Good morning, Glenn and everybody at Thrives. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Larry Crepeaux. I'm the Executive Director of Washington County Kids. And to my right is Katie Riley, Founder and Board President. And we're here to share a little bit about Washington County Kids, what we do, and the gap that exists, which is why we're here. Washington County Kids growth has continued from its founding in 2009 through this year when we added our first paid staff, myself. And I'm fortunate to work with an amazing group of volunteers towards our mission, which is to increase access to quality out-of-school time programs that equip Washington County children and youth for success. How do we do this? One thing we do is, as someone mentioned it earlier, network and community obviously is key, but we provide resources to parents and providers. We expand awareness to the need, and one of the reasons why we're here today is to share with you. And we engage collaborators in our growing network of providers and partners to look at recent successes and challenges that are affecting our community. A lot of the things that we do depend on 3 different areas. The parents, we do a provider database basically to connect parents up with providers that they may not have known about. We also do some live speaker series. So we have had topics such as parents helping with anxiety and depression, the digital age, how to keep your kids safe and healthy, and being a trauma-informed parent are some of the more recent topics. And then the providers. One of the new things that we're doing is we're having a monthly focus on providers, and it is simply a Zoom with myself and maybe some of the board members, and it's literally providers from all over Washington County. And it's just like this, networking and connecting about kind of the issues that they see, and it has been invaluable in helping us define kind of further driving our mission. What do we need to address? It also has informed different topics. We do some training for providers that actually end up with CKC credit hours. So we're really trying to connect everybody up in a few different ways. And then advocacy for funding for after school and summer programs, which we'll get into a little bit. And did you want to?
So we are focusing on school-age kids. And part of the reason we do that is because Washington County already has an early learning hub, but we are concerned about all kids. And what we're emphasizing today is a little bit more about Washington County. We really are appreciative of the Youth Development Oregon initiative, and what we're trying to do is focus on what Washington County needs. And so we do liaison work. We do participate in the steering committee for the Early Learning Hub, sit on the Juvenile Crime Prevention Advisory Committee, also substance abuse, the County Substance Abuse Prevention Advisory Committee. Also, we work with Oregon Ask, which is a statewide group, and Our Children Oregon, which is also statewide. And we also try to do that by compiling data which we believe will be helpful in terms of advocating and telling the story of why kids really do need out-of-school time programs. We partnered this past year with the League of Women Voters of Oregon to update their 1988 child care study and expand it to include after-school and summer programs. And that study is available on our website. In 2019, we issued a report on focus groups we had done with parents throughout the county about barriers they faced in terms of getting care for their kids. So let's look at a little bit of data here. So the total county population is over 600,000. Out of that, about 21% are kids under the age of 18. Only 5.2% are kids under the age of 5. We are focusing on the group that's school age, which is about 16%, and it's a larger group. There are 7 school districts in Washington County. Department of Ed reports on data regarding each district separately. We have compiled data to try to look at the county as a whole in order to see, okay, what is the total picture? So, free and reduced lunch program. This is often equated with economically disadvantaged kids in the county. And currently, we have 38 schools out of about 121 that have more than 50% of the kids in that school eligible for free and reduced lunch. And that's a pretty low bar. Okay, so this shows that there's really a problem. And this is up from 10 schools in 2019. We have about 2,500 kids who are homeless, that the schools count as homeless. That includes kids who are couch surfing. So we decided to look at test scores. We believe that test scores are sometimes the canary in the coal mine. They're showing us what the real problems are. And we first focused on 3rd grade because it's considered that kids who have capability or proficiency for 3rd grade reading and other skills are then able to understand the content that comes afterwards, okay, because they can read enough to then analyze the information that they're going through. What we see here, we did a comparison between scores in 2017, 2018, and 2022, 23, the most recent scores, to take a look at, okay, what might have happened during the pandemic. So you've got a before and after switch here. And we looked at the economically disadvantaged, in other words, the kids who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, versus all other students. So we see for third grade a drop of about 5% in terms of the proficiency decrease over there on the right. And for other students, 9%. So it was even greater for other students as well. See an even greater effect. The difference between the economically disadvantaged and other students was 38% in 2017, 2018. So actually the difference between those two groups decreased slightly. When we look at data, usually we consider if there's a difference of 5% or more, it's significant. So this is not really that big of a decrease necessarily, it's only 4%, but it still shows a pattern here. Okay, so looking then at math scores, we see pretty similar here, but an even greater disparity in terms of the difference between those who are economically disadvantaged and other students. It was 40%. But what would happen during the pandemic is that the difference between those two groups decreased. It meant that all kids were having problems. Okay, so because the difference then between the two of them was only 14% this year. All right, then what we decided to do is to take a look at adolescents. Adolescent kids are, adolescence is a period when it's the second greatest period of brain development. Kids are learning to be more independent. They are taking risks. They are still learning. They're dependent on their parents, but it's a really very huge, important time, as the people in youth development know. So we decided to look at 8th graders. Okay, so that is a key area here. So the English scores here. Economically disadvantaged, 42% were proficient in 2017, 2018. That's pretty bad, okay? 26% this year in the county. So that's a drop of 16%. Other students, however, they dropped, but it was about 8%, but it's still a drop. Now, one of the things that you need to know, too, is this group, this cohort, is the same group that in 2017, 2018 were tested at the 3rd grade level. Okay, so it's a good comparison here, too. But the proficiency difference between the economically disadvantaged and other students, okay, was 35% in 2017, 2018, but it increased to 43%. It's a huge difference in terms of language capability. Okay, looking at math. Here we have a drop for the economically disadvantaged of 13% between the 2 years. Other students, 19%. Once again, it's the same kind of pattern as with the 3rd graders, where they had an even greater drop than those who are economically disadvantaged. And you know why? Because those who are economically disadvantaged were already at a low point. Okay, so what we determined from here is that kids need our help, particularly older kids. And the situation was bad before, but it got worse. For kids ages 16 to 18, it's too late for early learning interventions. But out-of-school time programs can make a difference. So the research about after-school and summer programs tell us that it leads to better academic performance, more likelihood of graduating on time, social emotional skills, which help kids overcome challenges, and fewer problems with substance use. The social emotional skills thing I want to emphasize, a recent study just came out that says that for every dollar invested, you get $11 return. So the return on investment is great. We want them to have fewer problems with substance abuse, higher lifelong income, and there are intergenerational positive results. So it shows that it can even be cumulative. So if a kid participates in an out-of-school time program, their children and even grandchildren benefit from that experience. So we took a look at, we wanted to find out in Washington County how many kids are getting the benefit of these experiences. We did a survey in 2018. These are the results. 62% of the kids were being served in elementary school, 26% in middle school, and 13% in high school. So it really decreases. We are not serving all of the kids like we should in terms of out-of-school time programs. Then we also were talking to the juvenile division. They did an assessment of the kids who were going through their services. They found that 2/3 of the kids going through those juvenile department services had not been participating in any kind of outside of school activities. That includes sports, music, even after school and summer programs that we're talking about here. So the good news is that kids are resilient and they can find a path to success with the right help from us.
These are just some of the providers, the partners that we're working with, and we're always, as I mentioned earlier, always increasing, looking to increase. I want to ask, could we do a real quick show of hands? Are any of those numbers surprising to anybody, or is that pretty much where everybody thought we were? Just kind of curious. Okay. For me, the juvenile department slide, just go back. It's just shocking to me. I mean, it really tells you kind of all the way through. You want to go, oh, next one. Nope, go, no, after. Keep going. There we go. Okay, this was supposed to be an up arrow. Something happened with the format of the slide, but that was supposed to be the good news. But everybody in this room agrees this is our vision. All children will have the opportunity to reach their full potential. That is literally why we're here. Whether we're talking OST programs, whether we're talking early learning, that's the nice thing. This group, we all agree on it. So what we're asking today is just kind of ways that you can help Washington County kids basically move our mission forward. We are, as Katie mentioned, some surveys, we're actually talking with county commissioners, trying to get an updated needs assessment in this area. If you're so inclined, please email your support to Commissioner Willie. That's one thing you can do. Connect with us, let us know other providers that you have in your neighborhood, your local schools. It's like we want to make sure that we have a robust network of everybody. And please join our mailing list. We would love to get connected. We do a monthly newsletter so you can kind of see what's going on, and that will give you some direct links to those events that we talked about, like the monthly focus on providers. And lastly is our contact information, another subtle plug to join our mailing list. So.
And we are happy to answer any questions. Yes, go ahead.
Grab the microphone, please.
Oh, here, I got it.
Hi, Bruce Bartlett. I have a question for both the youth services and Washington County kids. I noticed that there's no explicit mention of the extension service programs, the Juntos program for high school graduation, the 4-H with the leadership. And it seems like with the university support behind those programs, it'd be extremely valuable partners. And I'm hoping that, I know I connected you, Katie, to 4-H a little bit.
Right.
And so can you both speak to the partnership or potential partnership with extension service programs?
I'll speak to that a little bit. So we are partnering as, whatever can be done in terms of 4-H. We have not, we've had some interaction with 4-H. We'd be happy to have more, okay? So we're open.
Yes, so we actually, a lot of our organizations may partner with 4-H. We are a part of it. One of our board members is actually works with 4-H directly, so we had some connections. I attended 4-H leadership convention, which I didn't even know existed. My kids are in 4-H personally and the animal sciences, so we went to this leadership convention where it's really focused on it. And so what we did with that opportunity is we asked the youth that are there to become stronger leaders, what can we do as a state agency to help better support youth? So we're engaging in it. A lot of our partners do connect with it, but it is one of those things that is definitely something that we're more interested in. We don't currently grant anything to extension communities, but we definitely have organizations that work with them.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jess O'Donnell with Active Children Portland. About a month ago, our governor put out a press release indicating that the decline in academic scores post-pandemic has kind of leveled off. But one of the things that she called for in it was a partnership between out-of-school time programming and schools, recognizing that this isn't something that schools can handle on their own to bolster our kids. I'm curious if you or anyone in the room has been privy to any of the conversations about how, yes, she's acknowledged that this is a thing, that there needs to be a partnership, but where do we go from here? How do we?
So there
Solidify.
is a new coalition that's been formed. Oregon Ask and Department of Ed are working together to look at, and other groups, including us, are looking at how do we get funding for out-of-school time programs. And the coalition is called EASE, Expanding After School and Summer Learning, or After School and Summer Experiences, that's it. And so there is a task group that will be looking on that, at that statewide. I think one of the key things is figuring out how do you fund it. And this is an issue, I think, for Washington County as well. And so that's one of the things that we look at. Grants are great, okay? However, they go away. After a while, you get a grant for 2 years, 5 years, whatever. What do you do after that? You need to have sustainable funding. And this is one of the problems that has happened with a lot of situations with grants. We did partner on an application for YDD and then HCCC. We didn't get either one, but we partnered with 4 or 5 providers plus Prosperidad, which is out of Centro Cultural, to try and offer training to kids to work in childcare, and then also develop their own worksource skills as well. We're hoping we can probably reapply or be considered again. Anyway, those are some ideas on that, but funding is a really critical issue.
Although I will say it was good news that it was actually called out. So we took that as a positive.
But the flip side of it with many of our philanthropic houses closing their fourth quarter giving and pausing their first quarter giving, felt like, okay, we all know that this is a big need, but now we can't do it because there's no money. Or limited money, more competitive.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Melissa Hong, and I'm a newly hired executive director for a newly emerging nonprofit called the Flip Museum. We're trying to establish a children's museum in Washington County, and we were recently funded by Washington County. And regarding the concern around funding, My background is in early childhood education, building systems and creating systems change. And I wanted to share a resource for you. It's called Promise Venture Studio. And the challenge that you're faced is universal across the nation. And there are philanthropic donors who are working internationally and nationally as well. And I just found this list of potential donors, foundations who are interested in investing in early childhood education, but I think it could potentially open doors for funding that you're seeking. And so I just want to share that out there. And I also would love to partner with you because the Flip Museum, we are trying to change the narrative around what children's museums are. We want to be out in the community and partner and create spaces. And we're not trying to start from a brick and mortar building. And so I just wanted to get the word out there as well.
Thank you so very, very much. Yeah, and we're anxious to partner with Flip also. So Leslie, you had a question?
Yeah. First, thank you for your partnership. I'm Leslie Mogill. I coordinate Parenting Together Washington County. It's the Parenting Hub, and we do a lot of co-promotion of activities. I appreciate that. I was wondering in the data, just a thought for the future, in all those data points that included economically disadvantaged. I've worked with the global majority my entire career, and I think the mission of serving all kids is what we all want. But within that block of economically disadvantaged, I would say the kids who have least access to after-school programs are not only economically disadvantaged, but even more so when you tease out race, ethnicity, neighborhood, zip code. And what is Washington County kids, because we don't have the funding we need to serve all, how do we take the small amounts that we might get, and you mentioned one good example of that, partnering with Central Cultural to apply for a grant to do just that. I'm just interested in that. And if you're looking at maybe digging deeper in the data piece.
Yeah, the data is there. It is, even here, what we did is we really tried to make it a little bit more simplified for a presentation. When you get into the data regarding breakdowns on ethnicity, it gets even more complicated. It really does. And but without any funding at all, you know, there is no public funding basically for after school and summer, very little. There's some SSA money, yes, but a lot of times that's up to the school district as whether they want to spend it on after school or summer. They have a choice, and a lot of times that money is going toward counseling and more teachers, which, you know, who can argue with that? You know, there's really problems there as well. But some of that money could be spent, and some of the school districts have used the money to spend it. Forest Grove and Hillsborough have done that to some degree. Anyway, very good point, and we really appreciate the partnership in terms of talking about training for staff, particularly providers. Any other questions? Yes. Yes.
People are talking about like systemic change and, you know, money issues aside, we know that summer learning loss is an issue. It's gone forever. Many states have gone to year-round school as a way to mitigate some of that summer learning loss. And then I also heard this thing in New York City, and they were talking about, you know, the lack of recreational activities for students. Yeah. And they realized, oh, we have all these school buildings, which are in fact public buildings. And so they've turned those buildings into community resources and really opened them up as community assets to solve recreational deserts, academic deserts, whatever it might be. So I just wonder when and where's the advocacy, because those disparities, as you pointed out, existed prior to the pandemic significantly. So something systemically isn't working in the way we approach public education, and we probably need to think about how that system should evolve and change as well.
Sure. Larry's going to talk to that a little bit.
So I have been trying to get the school districts, Beaverton and Hillsborough, to agree to support after-school activities, and there is a whole range of issues why the school districts can't or won't allow their buildings to be used after hours. So that's a really tough nut to crack.
So I'll make my way over there. But that's actually one of the largest issues that came out of our provider meetings. We hear it from multiple providers. The disparity between school districts within one county. Some welcome with open arms, some want to have nothing to do with them. And it's a huge issue that needs to be addressed.
So we have done some advocacy on that. We will continue to do that. I would suggest if you're interested in working on that with us, that you take a look at our contact information, get in touch, and we would love to work with you on it, because that is a huge issue. As taxpayers, we pay for those facilities. I mean, I don't want to minimize the problem they have in terms of staffing with custodial care, making sure their buildings are safe, because then the kids come back and they have to have their education in there as well. So there has to be a way of working on that. But in order to really help kids out and support them during non-school time, it's really key to work with them and try and figure out a way that does not break the bank for either side.
And Bruce, just to elaborate on the barriers to accessing our schools, I do know that the Beaverton School District School Board has, specifically Dr. Karen Perez, has mentioned that this is a priority for her to make her school buildings more accessible. And the biggest hurdle is the insurance, the insurance that organizations are required to have. And that's something that I don't know if they'll get to do this year because it's a bargaining year, but it's on her radar as something that's really important to increase community relationships between the school and kids. So that's a place to start, is just to remind her that it needs to be done.
All right.
Anything else? I know we have other speakers, so. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I'd like to welcome up our friends from Early Learning Washington County, Community Action. I don't know what order you want to go. Alessandro, do you want to go first? Yeah. All right.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Alessandro Mastrorocco. I work with Early Learning Washington County, specifically with the Preschool Promise Program and the coordinated enrollment. So I will take my 5 minutes to talk about a little bit coordinated enrollment, the efforts, the challenge we're facing in the county. So we have, as you know, different programs that provide public funded early learning programs to the family, different sponsors, different criteria for eligibility, different application, different procedures. So in this scenario, coordinated enrollment has an important role. So and also the alignment between the different organizations we are working in these fields. I would say that these efforts are produce a strong collaboration between all of us. Early Learning Washington County, the provider of Head Start, school district, we meet monthly trying to solve together all the challenges connected with the enrollment. We share information, we share data, we share the problems connected with the facility and the workforce. So from this point of view, the organization are trying to work together to increase the coordination. This is important to provide to the family the opportunity to get the information to select the program that best fits their needs. This is the important part of this coordination between the organization. We have strong collaboration with also Northwest Regional Educational School District, providing and sharing information about children that have need a special attention. So every time we have this situation in our application, in our conversation with the family, we immediately connect with them so they can proactively provide support to the family and to the provider, because both are part of this process. We have strong collaboration for professional development. There is another important part for the enrollment. So with CCNR, with Northwest Regional, we have meeting, but we also have frequent events, training, in which the coach of Northwest Regional, CCNR, the team of Early Learning Washington County, sit together at the same table, they share the challenges, they share the problem of the enrollment. So trying to increase the alignment in this field. But when you have several programs, it is always a trouble. Also in the outreach efforts, we are trying to build strong collaboration with all the organizations in Washington County. In the last month, trying to provide information, communication to the family about the programs, we collaborate with ODHS, WIC. We went together to their events. We went together to the food market, the free food market, where we can directly meet the people. We worked with the department, the team that support the family, inform them how is the process to enroll in the program, what are the eligibility criteria. So in this way, when we meet all the family they serve, they can provide also information about the early learning program. Challenges, there are a lot of challenges, of course. When you have a situation with program, they have a different kind of process and procedure, it's important also to coordinate the communication with the family. So it's important to give, but also for the program, from the organization, to know the difference between the program. Where are the schools? Which are the different curriculums? So all this part of communication need an increase in coordination. So this is another challenge we have. Family not always know the difference about the program, which is the program that best fit them. So we are exploring now an idea to create a common space, a website, a marketplace, where all this information can be organized, when all the school can be mapped, where provide a program so family can know which is the school that is close to them, or the facility that is more comfortable for them, which program, which curriculum can be fit better their needs. So this is a process, a project in progress, is a exploration now, but we hope that in the next month we'll be able to create this space where family can go and find all the information we need. Another important challenge is a kind of bottleneck for the enrollment is the income. So we have different criteria for income based on the federal poverty level. The change in the demographic, the increase in the minimum wage, all these situations are in some way make harder to enroll family that need early learning program. To give you an example, for a preschool promise, the limit for a family of four is $60,000. In Head Start is even less, around $40,000. So this is a huge problem from the enrollment that we need to be discussed. So we are doing advocacy, but there's a big problem in this moment for the enrollment in the program. Transportation, this is another big issue for all the programs. Every time I talk with a family that is moving out for a preschool promise, 80% of the time the transportation is one of the issues. Any kind of problem with transportation will say, I cannot reach anymore the school, I cannot send my kids to the school. So there is some opportunity of transportation in both programs, but still it's not enough for the needs of the family in Washington County. Another challenge are the hour of service, so the hour we provide of child care. 6 hours is the average service for day, I would say, and you can understand that the parents who work 6 hours can impact the day they work and create. So the request, the need of extended hours is on another big conversation we have with the family, they ask for, and sometimes this create a trouble because we need extra resources for the family to pay out of the pocket. So this is another big issue that impact the enrollment. And last things is also find the space for the school where provide service. Early Learning Washington County this year supported, coordinated the efforts of some organization. We want to open preschool promise facility. We try to create a conversation with the school district, find a facility. So this is another part of the challenge in the offer of this program. So find a facility for the provider who want to open a space for the children. Thank you. I will pass to.
Thank you, Alessandro. Here, I'll even give you your own microphone.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Karen Henkemeyer, Director of Family Stability at Community Action.
And I'm Kemp Shuey. I'm the Executive Director at Community Action. And our Director of Head Start was going to be here today, but there was a last-minute scheduling change. So sorry you're stuck with me on that front. But just to say a little bit about our organization, why you're seeing two of us. So Community Action, we lead the way to eliminate conditions of poverty and create opportunities for people and communities to thrive. We've been doing that for nearly 60 years in Washington County. And one of those areas where we have long felt we have an impact there is in early childhood education, and that's been core to our organization since the beginning. So when you see Community Action, that is a huge swath of our work. And so we wanted, for us, we thought it would be valuable for Karen and Julie / myself today, just to talk a little bit about what we're seeing from a couple of those different lenses. So I don't know if you want me to go first to talk from the Head Start lens, or if you want to.
I can go first.
Let you go.
Okay. So again, Karen Henkemeyer, my pronouns are she, her, Director of Family Stability. And our department at Community Action is only 2 years old. And what we get to do is support families and early educators. I oversee 3 programs: Help Me Grow, a family support team, which is Healthy Families, and a family support coach, and Child Care Resource and Referral. And what we know about Washington County is that 40% of the population is BIPOC. What we also know is the highest minority is the population is Latinx community. We also know that 1 in 12 children under the age of 18 that are Latinx live in poverty. And that's compared to 1 in 4 of white children under the age of 18 that live in poverty. So our culturally responsive, trauma-informed department really wants to focus on those populations that are marginally, have been marginalized and have not been served. And so we have staff that speak Somali, Arabic, and Spanish, and that is our focus to make sure that we're working with families from a diverse population. Help Me Grow is our like the open door for families. It serves families that are prenatal to age 5 for a myriad of resources for early educational resources for families, and for resources such as getting enrolled in the Oregon Health Plan and getting your first prenatal appointment. That's so very important. Also with getting screened for home visiting services, which then could be the Nurse Family Home Partnership. It could be with our Healthy Families team. And Healthy Families is a home visiting where you can get a home visitor coming to your home once a week. And that could be when you're prenatal and all the way up to age 3. So that's helping guidance and building confidence in parenting skills. And then with our Child Care Resource and Referral, we support hundreds of early educators in Washington County. Currently, we have over 750 child care programs in the county, and we serve also the preschool promise child care providers. We serve licensed exempt child care providers, registered family, certified family, and child care centers. And we do that with coaching, business support. We do that with providing hundreds of hours of training in English, Spanish, Arabic, and Somali. And so what we need, when I think of the question, how are our children, we need to ask, how are our parents? And we need to make sure that our families are stable, and the resources that we provide in our department are what can help make families stable. One, the resources they call Help Me Grow, they get connected and referred to all the different resources in the community, and some get referred to home visiting for that really intensive support and guidance. And then the CCR&R helps parents work, because what my mantra is, childcare is the profession that make all other professions possible. So that's the department. Any questions on that? Yes, Begonia.
No, Glenn is going to say something to me. So, Karen, you say something very important about how the families are doing, but I want to ask, how are the providers doing? Because now they have to deal with a lot of behavioral issues. So can you speak a little bit about what kind of behavioral support system they have? Where are they in terms of like burnout? And how are they supporting inclusive classrooms? How does it look like for them?
So everybody get out your hankies and tissues, because it's not good. So not only in Washington County, but statewide and nationwide, we are at a severe crisis for mental health supports. We know in Washington County that we are our pregnant and new moms are at a very high risk for mental health needs compared to other counties in the state as well as the nation. We also know that we are at such a deficit of supports for mental health supports. Right now, we are losing child care providers at such a rate because of the issues they're seeing in the classroom, because they're burnt out. We have family child care providers that are doing the HR, they're doing the janitor work, they're doing their accounting work, and they're working 70 hours a week. So they are leaving the field. There is not enough pay for these individuals. Some enter the field at maybe $20 an hour, but they have a family of 3. How are they going to afford childcare themselves? They can't. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
Well, and that might be a good place for me to jump in. I mean, I think part of why we wanted to also mention our Head Start program, which is to provide that lens of what we're seeing at a program level, and that's exactly what our own staff and our classroom, our own staff are struggling with. Just the other week, I believe it's 1 in 5 of our students are on an IFSP. So that's an individual family services plan. So while it's not necessarily a bad thing, there's a strong correlation with a lot of extra work and support that's needed for that child and that family who are on an IFSP. So how many people here have ever run a classroom before? Maybe any passel of kids, right? So if you had 15 kids and 1 out of 5 needs a lot of extra support, how much time, energy, and effort is that taking? So to Karen's point about burnout, it's a challenge to get people into the workforce to begin with. It's really hard to keep them in when they're having to deal with a lot of not educational issues. They're there to teach, they're there to educate, build the social emotional development of these young children so they're ready to learn when they show up in kindergarten and beyond. I think that's the thing we're seeing here today, is that through line of how important all of these sorts of services and interventions are, particularly for at-risk populations, communities of color, low-income families, that there's that need for constant support and engagement all the way through this educational journey. So when they get into their early 20s, just talking with Andrew about trying to figure out how come nobody in their 20s seems to be entering the workforce right now. How are we keeping these kids engaged from birth to 20 plus?
I was just going to say, with a lot of the grants and talk about those type of supports and finding programs to support, how come nobody's coming up with some sort of plan like that where they can have a behavioral program within, especially community action, since you're such a big organization, try and get some grant funding for those to be able to support some of these in-home providers, and also, some of these after-school programs, because as we know, without that support, how successful are those families going to be? So I think starting from the ground up being able to have those programs, but then have the adequate support to help those kiddos in those after-school programs, in these preschool programs, because if they're not successful there, how are they going to be successful at 3rd grade, 8th grade? So I think starting at that base is really important.
Veronica, thank you so much for that question, and I really appreciate it. So right now, we are working with Washington County on a pilot project, our department is, and Jess Rogers is the manager of our support team, and right now, part of this pilot project is she oversees a family support coach, where if we have a child care provider who has a child with issues in their program, and they need supports, the family support, the coach that is with the child care provider coach will work with the family support coach and the family to help get the resources they need for mental health. And right now, the only services that really access mental health are like those that are publicly funded, like Head Start. And so we do have a contract with LifeWorks Northwest for an infant early childhood mental health consultant, but that position has been open for months and we're not able to fill. And if you look on the job boards, there's so many open positions, but the pay is $61,000 annually for an incredibly stressful job, and that's burnout is like nothing. So we are doing that work, and we just applied for another $1 million for 2 years for 2 additional infant early childhood mental health and inclusion coaches. So we are in the works of bringing more of that to our community.
We see the benefit of that on the Head Start program, we have members of our staff who are behavioral mental health specialists. So in the cases where we have a child, we were just hearing about one of our kids who had been expelled from a couple of different child care programs and started with ours. He was expelled because he was biting, he was hitting. We have those resources in place within our program, but we're fortunate that we have the infrastructure to do that. But again, we could also use more of that because the demand is so high. But being able to intervene with him, with our staff, and that's a whole collaborative approach, and it's involving the parents, we're able to redirect those behaviors. We're able to get him back on track, being able to self-regulate, control, not understand what are those what might be the past traumas or traumas he's dealing with that might be driving those. And it just requires a lot of intensive time and support. We're lucky we've got some members on our team who can do that for the Head Start program, but like Karen says, for the providers at large, we have a mixed delivery system here in Washington County. There's still a great need.
There are hundreds of child care providers out there that are in isolation that do not have those supports, and that's what we're trying to bring to our community. Yeah.
My name is Rob Ruthio. I work at the Beaverton Area Chamber of Commerce doing small business support, and we've been working with Community Action Team on child care resource and referral. We're in the process of developing. One of the other challenges a lot of small child care businesses have is the business of childcare. They're good at taking care of kids and doing that, but they don't know the business side. We're in the process of developing a series of workshops that are very culturally sensitive and culturally specific to help train people on how can you grow from, say, 3 kids to 10 kids. What's the business process of doing so? This Saturday, I have the pleasure of being able to work with a bunch of Somali providers or people who are interested in working. There's a session at the Beaverton Library, and we're trying to do some just listening and learning, and how can we train these people on kind of the business side. How do you get started? How do you manage a budget? How do you project for growth? How do you deal with staff? So my colleague, Christian Arroyo, is also working on that effort so that we can provide this training, and we've had a great partnership with CCRNR, so thank you for the work that you're doing.
These are the kind of champions we need in our community, right here.
Thank you both.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Ooh, Begonia, did you get the last word?
Yes, you may.
Do you need a microphone, Begonia?
Yes, she does. The TV does.
So speaking about champions, so I don't want to leave this room today without mentioning that many of the funding opportunities, there is not an alignment, there are standalone strategies, completely disregards that there is a cap in the number of professionals that do behavioral and mental health support. And when we look at the BIPOC community in terms of those professionals, it looks even worse, but nobody's actually building a pipeline. And what we're doing is trying to retain the same people.
Right.
But they still don't make wages that are allowing them to live and have a quality life. So there is a lot of things that we have to be doing holistically, not just like standalone strategies.
I think one important stat to keep in mind, and if you go, it's been a while since we produced it, but we have an Issues of Poverty report. It's a few years old now, but to be making it in Washington County, you need to be earning about $75,000 a year for a family of 3 with a kid. That should be a really good job. And then when you figure in the child care component, maybe 25% of that family bill needs to go to child care.
29% is actually, and MIT website states that Washington County, you need $31 an hour for a family of one parent, one child for a living wage.
Yeah, so it's one of those things between child care and housing. If our community was able to make significant progress on reducing those costs for families, that would be pretty transformative for what it means to be able to live here and be thriving in Washington County.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
So I just wanted to, Kemp, thanks for standing in for Julie, but I'm channeling Julie right now as a partner of Julie and as a respectful cheerleader for Head Start Comprehensive Services. It's not education, it's all of those things that the families get. I applaud the program, but there's some good, how are our children? There's some good news and some bad news. And the good news is that Head Start in Community Action has opportunities for families who are that hard,
Burying
that
the lead.
challenge.
Thank you, Leslie.
I mean, if Julie were here, she would say this, has opportunities for comprehensive services and early childhood education right here in Washington County. The bad news is, if those opportunities are not leveraged, they could be lost, potentially.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that to this room of really committed and passionate people because we can't afford to lose those opportunities. So in whatever connections you have with families who may be 100% or below, Alessandro named the challenge. You name the challenge and what you need to survive and pay rent and buy groceries in Washington County. They don't line up, but the reality is that's the standard. If you have connections with families who don't know that this is an opportunity, now is the time to hook them up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leslie. caowash.org. You can find our enrollment material as well, or the Hub's website. Yeah, I mean, thank you. Absolutely. We have slots, we have some room.
Thank you, Karen and Kemp. I want to invite Chelsea up to the front of the room. She's going to round us out with her final presentation. Welcome. There's your little.
That's the arrow.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you'll need one of these.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's getting a little heavy in here. I'm going to be sure to end with a little bit of hope. And thank you to Vision Action Network for inviting me. I know each and every one of you could get up here and do the exact same thing I'm about to do, so I honor your work and the time that you're dedicated to being here and listening to the speakers this morning. I'm Chelsea King. I am the Executive Director of the Oregon Health and Education Collaborative. I come to this work via the education field. From 2015 to 2023, I sat on the Westland-Wilsonville School Board. I see some familiar faces in here. Good to see you, Carol. Most of those years as vice chair or chair, and got this job about a year ago. So we're newly launched, have an incredible board, and leaders from healthcare and education. I put some materials out front, so if you want to grab them on your way out, you're welcome to. Get my little cheat sheet here. You already got a pretty good overview of how our children I was standing in the back, because it's standing room only in here, nodding my head. Those stats around our kiddos' academic performance, the conversation around the behavioral health needs, we have a ton of numerical, qualitative, and anecdotal evidence that says our children are not faring well, and neither are our adults. And so, I'll just touch on that. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of the data because you know it. The chronic stress of racism and poverty takes an enormous toll on our families. It's been deemed a public health crisis. Adverse childhood experiences, everybody in here knows about that by now. That increases, the higher your number goes, the more likely you are to have long-term health effects. There's a lot of really good research coming out about epigenetics and how trauma is passed from one generation to another. If you haven't encountered this research yet, just go to ChatGPT and ask about the impact of trauma on the developing fetus, or the history even of trauma that white folks pass down from one to the other. We experienced, I identify as white. My ancestors experienced trauma as well. So there's a really good book called My Grandmother's Hands, and that's kind of what I'm referring to right now when I talk about that. So, all right, there's some really good data out there about the opportunity gap that exists from zip code to zip code. There's something called the Child Opportunity Index. You can zoom in to a zip code. It's color-coded by race and socioeconomic status, and you can see how those opportunity gaps are correlated. And this is a room full of people doing really amazing work with a fair amount of dollars, but no matter how much we invest and how many amazing programs we roll out, we keep getting disparate and inequitable outcomes despite our best efforts. This means the system is broken. So let me talk to you about that for just a minute. I'm a person who grew up in rural Southern Oregon. I have a high ACE score. Luckily, I loved school. Academics gave me a pathway out of some of the intergenerational patterns my family lived. My beloved sister did not love school. School did not love her. She's a little more of a rebel than I was. And she ended up dropping out of high school. She was a 19-year-old person with addictions in my family. And here we were, young people growing up in rural Southern Oregon. We were part of the system. The system knew us. And when she was a 19-year-old pregnant person, back into the system, right? When I say that, I mean like getting public health services, like getting the publicly funded home visiting, the public programs. The system didn't really work for her. She fell through the cracks. I watched my nephews. They dropped out of high school during COVID. So I share this story just to say, I'm personalizing it, right? All of you in here probably can share a story from your own experience or someone you love who has gone through this. All right, so here's just kind of a little graphic that sort of demonstrates that. A person who's pregnant wants to do the best by their child and is struggling to make ends meet because of all these things we've been talking about this morning. So the Oregon Health and Education Collaborative was formed to get healthcare and education more integrated and working together in partnership to address these issues. And we're asking really big questions because that's what's required when we want to make systems level change, right? If anything was possible, if we could do anything at all, what would it take to make sure that every single child born in the state of Oregon, because we're statewide, will have an equitable opportunity to succeed? And we're looking at families and communities because of the pair of ACEs, right? If you haven't seen that yet, it's a really interesting way of talking about ACEs. It's not just in the individual, but it's the systems and the institutions in our communities that also cause trauma in our lives, right? Not just your own lived experience in your family. So they hired me as an executive director just to achieve these goals, all right? Yeah. All right, so here they are. We're going to address the conditions of poverty and racism. And I'm not going to read these whole things to you, but I just want to highlight some words here. And this first one, that word structural is important, because what we're looking at is the ways that institutions create structural barriers, right? This is not about the individual. So we're looking at the structural inequities. The word I wanted to highlight on this next one is this idea of integrated. And I've heard you all kind of touching on this throughout the morning, right? Like, how do we braid funding? How do we build partnerships? How do we coalesce systems and programs around each other to meet shared goals, all right? So that word integrated is important there. And so there's that idea of partnerships. We're really looking at the healthcare and education institutions. Social services will play a role in that. And then this word here on this fourth goal, do you think I'll be able to achieve this in the first year or two? The asset-based. I really like this as someone who grew up with food insecurity and lack of access to medical care in rural Southern Oregon. I don't want to be a statistic and an at-risk human being, right? There are a lot of elements of resilience and togetherness and resourcefulness that come out of some of these communities who live on the margins, right? So looking at, to make sure that even as we talk about these things, we say communities have a lot of assets that they offer to our economy and our neighborhoods. So there's our mission. I'll just kind of breeze past this. We're just going to interrupt some intergenerational patterns by changing the system and getting healthcare and education to work together, right? All right, are you all down? Yep, I know you're all trying to do this as well. There's a nice little graphic that shows all the folks that we want to bring to the table. Now, what I want to do is tell you a little bit about how we're going to do that, and then I'm going to end with some hope, as I promised. So we are working to develop what we're calling a child success model, and we know it needs to live in the community. That the state is doing some amazing things, but the state is not going to, is not where children and families live, right? They live in neighborhoods. And so we want to do community-based solutions. So how we're doing this, we have 4 design pilots that have been selected around the state. We're funding them. And they didn't tell me when they hired me as an executive director I was basically a professional fundraiser. Did you all know that? So we've been raising a lot of money. We're delivering it to these design pilots. They are backbone entities. They are cross-sector collaborations living in 4 communities around the state. We're going to bring them all together in a learning collaborative. We have professional facilitators. We have researchers. So we're going to collect data, qualitative and quantitative, from these folks that are coming together. And we're bumping up against that 2025 legislative session. There's some really good bills already being baked to go into that session. We want to make sure community voice is part of those bills or propose our own. And the policy recommendations are going to come out of that learning collaborative from the input of these people who are in the communities doing the work. And so what are we going to achieve from that? We're going to disrupt some intergenerational cycles and start to see better outcomes for all of our kids in the state. It's important just to note, as a new organization, doing work very similar to some other organizations, that we are working to align. I don't know if any of you know about Raise Up Oregon 2.0, the whole plan that came out. It's got like ODE and ODHS and OHA and all the other acronyms working together to come up with a really integrated plan. It's amazing. The metrics are awesome. We're aligned with that. We're bringing it to life in the community. Value-based payments, it's a healthcare term. I won't go into it right now. There's a lot of good stuff going on in the healthcare industry. Well, you want to look for some funding for housing and transportation and things like that. Go to those CCOs, yeah. All right, so we're aligned with those statewide efforts. And I think just ending with some hope. Have any of you encountered this framework, healthy outcomes from positive experiences? I've been loving this because it's couched as a PCE instead of an ACE, right? So it's the positive childhood experiences. What gives somebody resilience? Why do some communities seem to thrive even when facing chronic poverty and racism, right? Positive childhood experiences is research-based. It's coming out of Tufts University. There's a lot of really good stuff there. You can go to HOPE website, the acronym right there. And these are the 4 pillars. And so I just want to end with like, y'all are doing it, right? Like we are doing this. We are working on early relational health. Those are those nurturing, supportive relationships that happen very young, all right? Think attachment theory and, it's early relational health. The second one, hello, we know this. Children need to be able to walk to school safely. They need to have a safe community to play in, safe playgrounds to go to, safe and stable and productive environments, their schools, their homes, their YMCAs, their after-school programs. This third one is one I'm really curious about right now. I think that there's a bit of a vacuum around opportunities for constructive social engagement and to develop this sense of connectedness. It's basically like that human need for meaningful contribution, right? That we all have. Why are we sitting in this room, right? Like it's to get that paycheck, but it's also because we want to be a part of something. As a mom of 3 who lived through COVID, I can tell you when my adolescents who were going through that rapid brain development had that removed from them during COVID, those were some dark days in my house. I think probably some other folks in here can say they lived that. So how are we going to give meaningful contribution and a sense of social engagement to our young people? And then I heard a lot of folks talking about this, that training, right? We need to teach social emotional competencies, right? We need to teach mindfulness. We need to teach stress management, healthy choices under pressure, things like that that maybe we weren't always taught when we were growing up, right? So those are the things we know from research will mitigate the impact of trauma. So, OHEC is what we call ourselves, the Oregon Health and Education Collaboratives, are like, oh heck, why not abandon everything we thought was true and come up with a better way to do things? We know we have the vision and the will, and we're working on this upstream initiative is what we're calling it. There's a handout somewhere, they're floating around, they're out front, thank you. And then also a handout about my amazing board, who I aim to please. And you can join us. Of course, the plug for the email list is there, and then LinkedIn is an easy way to follow us as well. And yeah, I think that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, John.
Questions? Does anyone have a question for Chelsea? Bruce.
I just want to Hello. I just want to very briefly touch on the lockdown, lockout processes that go on in schools. Having been involved in the ACES collaboration here in the county, thinking about it, every time children go through a lockdown or a lockout, we just sort of tick it off as a box that something happens. But I have to imagine that it is a traumatizing event for all children that we just routinely accept without recognizing it. And so anything we can do to provide after support for those activities would be incredibly valuable. Thank you.
Absolutely. We actually have zero data that shows that does anything to protect our children in the case of an active shooter. We do have legislation in place that requires that schools do some sort of drill. So there's something happening at the legislature, but how those drills are run can be trauma informed. Yeah, I have a teenage daughter who said that their heart didn't stop racing for like 2 periods after the drill. Have you all ever been in a school when it happens? It's really, that is a real thing. So thank you for mentioning that. I think everybody might just be like ready to go to the bathroom.
Anyone else? All right, wonderful. Thank you, Chelsea. Appreciate it.